Svelte has announced that his framework Svelte kit is now in public beta. They also announced the Snowpack is no longer being used for their dev server and they're switching to Vite. If you want to play around with Vite and Svelte without using Svelte kit, you can do that. The fastest way to do that is to go on Get Started and create a new app. And during installation, you'll have an option to select the Svelte as a template. But in this video, we're going to focus on how to convert your existing Svelte app to Vite. Let's start with a fresh app. Go there, install the dependencies, and just run it so we can make sure everything is fine. So cool, we have the hello world. Let's go to code. And the first thing we could do is to go and remove everything Rollup related. We can also remove the serve CLI because Vite can handle that. So then we can go ahead and add Vite and Vite plugin for Svelte. Okay, cool. Then we can go ahead and remove the Rollup config and add the Vite config. In the Vite config, we can add define config from Vite. We can also import Svelte from the Svelte plugin and add the plugin Svelte in the define config file. Then we can go back and update our scripts. So build is going to be Vite build. Dev is going to be just Vite. And start can be Vite preview. Next, we need to go to our public folder and move the index file to root. We can also remove the build folder, we don't need that. And in the index file, we can remove the bundle CSS. And we can also rename this to find our file in the source main.js. This needs to be a script type module. And with any luck, that should be it. Let's go to our URL with the new port. We have the hello world. Try to update something. Let's remove this, for example. And it's gone. Okay, cool. So this seems to be working. Now let's do yarn build. One of the differences when you compare it to Snowpack is that Vite uses Rollup to create its bundle. Let's go into dist and the index.html. And here you can see that this build targets browsers that have native support for ES module. That basically means that there is no support for IE11 and the older Edge browsers, which is, to be honest, fine by me. If you want this build to support a little older JavaScript, you can change the target in the Vite config. The lowest you can get here is ES 2015. If you want to support older browsers, you need to add Vite plugin legacy. So let's do that. You first need to install it. Then you need to import the plugin and add it to the plugins array. We'll use the default target and let's do build again. As you can see now, build is taking longer. It took us 1.5 seconds, now it's 4.5. And we also have 3 new files. Let's go to the index.html and dist. So you see for the browsers who will ignore the type module script, the files with the suffix legacy will be injected. That's how they approach to supporting older browsers. Because Vite uses Rollup as the bundler, you can also add any custom Rollup options that you maybe had in your project. It also supports a lot of Rollup plugins, so the conversion should be pretty straightforward. Let's do one more thing to compare Vite and Snowpack. Let's start a server again. And for this example, we would need well-known counterexample. So let's do this. Let's set counter to 0. I'm going to just say hello here and add a button that on click is going to increment. Okay, cool. We have the counter working. But let's make a change here. Let's say hello YouTube. As you can see, when we did a change, the counter lost his state. Usually when people hear hot module replacement, they assume that the state will be preserved also. The Svelte team decided to disable this by default, but you can enable that in the Vite config. Let's do that. We can go into Svelte and just pass preserve local state. Let's come back, hit our counter and do some updates. We'll remove the YouTube here. Now, as you can see, the counter preserved its state. The reason they removed it is because this behavior can become really unexpected when the app becomes bigger. Let me show you. So for example, now the counter is set at 4, and you can go and set the init value of the counter to be 10. When you come back, the Vite did refresh, but the state has been preserved. So it's not going to continue to count from 10 to be 11 or 12. It's going to keep it at 4, and it's going to continue incrementing it accordingly. So you basically need to refresh the app so you can get the count from 10 to 12. For me, that's an okay behavior because preserving state can be useful if you're styling some modal or some dropdown that needs to be shown based on some state. So as long as you're aware of the consequences, you can have this option enabled. So that's it. Our Svelte app is now using Vite successfully.